Hello, world. I actually don't get it. I came across posts of people making mention that the 7 house in astrology represents open enemies and the 12 house represents hidden enemies. Well, they leave out the part that the 6th house also represents enemies. So, which one truly actually represents open enemies? Is it the 6th house or the 7th house? This is where I don't get it because you got a lot of people that follow Western astrology saying that the 7th house represents open enemies, which is ironic considering the fact that you would think the house opposite the house of hidden enemies would be the house that actually truly represents your enemies or your, I guess, your public or open enemies as these people would describe it. This is the problem with Western astrology on the whole. Not exactly tropical astrology, but Western astrology, as in the system. In that system, they use many different things like modern astrology, Hellenistic, traditional. And the problem with these things is that people who use those systems, they don't try to use demonstrations or examples to back up what they're saying. And another big issue is that those people tend to use Placidus charts. There's a big issue with using Placidus charts. One of the biggest issues is that planets tend to be in the incorrect houses when you use Placidus charts. So if that's the case, man, let's say you have Sun in the 7th house of your Placidus chart, but if you use whole sign and it's actually in the 6th house, that could become problematic because a person that's using Placidus chart, they'll see that their house is in their sun is in the 7th house, and they'd be like, oh well, the 7th house doesn't mean this because I did entrepreneurship. I was always self-employed. And in actuality, what if their sun is in the 6th house in whole sign? This would make them interpret the houses very incorrectly. And this is where it becomes problematic because a lot of people that use Western astrology, they interpret things off of he say, she say without any actual factual basis. And they go based on their own experiences, especially when using a Placidus chart, which will give wrong interpretations because they're experiencing things and they're gonna say, oh well, my experience doesn't line up with this placement, but they're not actually seeing the placement correctly. So my recommendation for those that use wheel charts, those wheel chart diagram in astrology is to use whole sign. Whole sign is a pretty great system that will help you understand a lot of these placements. Let's go back to the basics, right? In any form of astrology, the 7th house is originally ruled by Libra. So the 7th house has to take on the meaning of the 7th house has to take on the characteristics of what the Libra zodiac sign represents. I mean, to simply put, the Libra zodiac sign represents things like marriage, trying to make agreements happen, negotiations, conflict resolution, trying to find resolutions for problems because the zodiac sign comes after the the Virgo zodiac sign. The Virgo zodiac sign is more so about finding problems, trying to manage things, and legal disputes. The zodiac sign after that, which is Libra, emphasizes on trying to negotiate, make agreements happen, trying to build contractual obligations, which is another form of agreements or I guess partnerships as well, because that's a legal bond. The 7 shows how we bond with strangers and how strangers bond with us. Libra is also heavily about interactions with other people, particularly strangers, especially in the public. So you would notice that the Libra zodiac sign doesn't really have anything to do with enemies or problems. Maybe it's more so about finding the solution about problems, but it isn't exactly about enemies of that sort. Then someone in the comments, I should use a screenshot for this too, off of Reddit. This person said that the seven O's represents people that are closest to you. These are the type of ridiculous comments I tend to come across. One of the best common explanation as to why the seven O's represent hidden enemies I came across was that, well, not hidden enemies, why it represents open enemies is that the first house represents you, and the house opposite it is everybody else but you, which is partially true. This first house does indeed represent you as an individual, and the house opposite it represents what? People that aren't you, people that you're not fond of, people you don't know. This is why the seven house represents strangers a lot, strangers in the public. Opposite of you could be that companion as well, which is that twin flame, or I guess today, and always known as the spouse. And again, companion. Those are things related to Libra. Libra is about companionship. Libra is about judging things so you can bring a balance to stuff. The seven O's can sort of represent enemies a tad bit if malefic planets are placed there or transiting there. Let's say you get Saturn, and that might make you have a spouse that you feel is the enemy, sort of. Because people that we don't like or shout at us and stuff like that give us bad treatment, which a malefic planet in the first or the seven O's is more likely to do. It's gonna make you run into strangers in public that may shout at you and stuff like that. So some people may perceive that as enemies, but in actuality, the six O's truly represent enemies and open enemies. And hence why it represents legal disputes as well. I've noticed the six O's represents fights as well. People with diseases or injuries may consider the disease as an enemy. Hence why the six O's puts lots of emphasis on things like obstacles, competitions, because who gives us competitions and obstacles? People that go against us. Meaning these people aren't really our teammates or partners or partnerships, which sounds more like the seven O's. The six O's, people that gives us obstacles and people we go up against in competitions, those are enemies. And obviously they'll be open too. But to not sound like a hypocrite or anything, I would like the viewer or the listener to test this out on themselves, or look at other charts and see if this house truly represents enemies. This house, as in the sixth house, represents enemies, and I guess you could say open or public enemies, as some people may describe it. I tested the sixth house on my own by using the transits to see if it truly represents enemies. And for me, it worked perfectly. So what I'll do is I'll just give people some bird chart placements, and they could test it out, or look at any celebrity that may have these placements and see. All you gotta do is just use these simple ascendants, and you'll find out. Gemini ascendants with Mars in the sixth house can hate their older male siblings. Cancer ascendants with Venus in the sixth house can hate their older female siblings. Sagittarius ascendants with Venus in the sixth house can hate their older female siblings. Therefore, relationships, men with Venus in the 12th or the sixth house may hate their past girlfriends. Flip it over, woman with Mars in the sixth or the 12th house may hate past boyfriends. Another thing people were inquiring is what hidden enemies the 12 host truly represents. Well, from my own discoveries, personally, by using the transits, I would discover that the 12 host hidden enemies just represents people that you catch talking bad about you. Or they may not even be talking bad about you. You just overhear them talking about you. So you may walk into a room and they may stop speaking out of nowhere. You know, those are your hidden enemies. And if someone is, you know, talking about you and you overhear them and then they stop the conversation and stuff like that, most likely that means these people would have ill will towards you. Regardless, though, planets in the 12 hosts, unless it's the Rahu or the Ketu, South Node or the North Node, most of the other planets will have an aspect onto the 6th house of enemies. So the planets influencing those two houses will still represent your enemies openly as well, most of the time. Some say use the 12 house lord and 12 house ruler to identify your hidden enemies. That make it work, but I haven't tested it that much as of yet. I don't really focus too much on hidden enemies because enemies and hidden enemies, they tend to be the same thing. So if you understand the Sithos pretty well, the hidden enemies that the 12s represent won't really be too much because of a difference. Because you already know those people are your hidden enemies anyways. I say that because they aren't really hidden. You'll know. You'll catch them talking about you. Stuff like that. You'll know that they're your enemy. So the hidden enemies I've noticed don't really apply in real life. Not that much. You'll know if someone is going against you and who those people are that may have ill will towards you. Another thing is that the Sitsos competitions, I've noticed that the enemies could also be people you be competitive with. For example, might not even be something that you intentionally do, but the person may try to do it. So, for example, if you have moon in your Sitsos, you may have a mother that tries to outdo the things that you have achieved. So, let's say you cooked on Sunday, then your mother would try and cook the next day, and then to prove that her cooking is better. You come across instances like that. Anyways, follow me on the other apps. There will be more videos to come.